When news outlets heard that 9 skydivers and 2 pilots not only survived a 2-plane mid-air collision, but also captured the entire crash on camera, TV producers salivated over the story. But the video aired in just one place, on NBC.
All on board survived, thanks in large part to the fact that they were all skydivers and were prepared to jump and knew how. And many of them were recording video of the moment and their safe return to Earth.
That report aired exclusively due to a financial agreement between NBC and the makers of that footage. According to the Washington Post, NBC didn't just get footage for their money, they also got exclusive interviews with the skydivers. Traditional news outlets have often had rules against paying sources for interviews. NBC firmly denies any financial agreement for the interviews, but admits it did pay for the footage. According to a company spokesperson, quote, "The licensing of this footage is standard industry practice and is the result of a very competitive process with other major broadcast outlets." But if the practice was standard, why are critics crying foul? Taking a deeper look at the use of cash for coverage and how it affects reporting, we turn to Paul Farhi, author of the Washington Post article about NBC's payment practices, and in New York City, Callie Crossley, host of the news program Under the Radar on WGBH, a public radio station in Boston. So Paul, I'll go to you first. You broke this story. NBC is saying, look, everybody wanted to license this video. We're just paying the people who made it for access to the video. What's wrong with that?
Well, it is effectively paying for news. What NBC did was pay for the footage in a bidding war with several networks, including ABC. But as part of that agreement, they also locked up the interviews with the pilot and the skydivers, all 11 of them, to appear on camera. They were locked out of any other interviews for a 2-week period, according to one of the pilots or one of the skydivers involved. So clearly, it's a package deal.
So, Callie, I can remember instances where ABC was criticized for paying $200,000 to Casey Anthony for family photos, the accused murderess. And eventually, ABC agreed to disclose such payments when they made them, and then they got so many inquiries about hot interviews that they eventually said, okay, we're not going to pay people at the center of big stories anymore. Why do we have this restriction, and why do so many networks seem to be doing whatever they can to skirt it?
Well, we have this restriction because it allows you to get the real story. There's always the possibility and probably the probability that somebody's going to enhance the story if they're being paid. There's just something about paying someone to tell the truth, for journalists' sake anyway, that really calls into question the integrity of the story. So that's why we have the practice of not doing it. But the practice of paying for it now becomes murky as people want footage. So I really do see why networks are trying to get the pictures, the footage, which is really valuable commodity because it's all over the web. It's going to be used a million places. They have many platforms upon which to use it. But it's the interviews that are still called into question in this scenario. And it just can't be done. And it so distresses me because you have really good journalists who can get these interviews without having to pay for them. I'm reminded of my colleague in Boston, Ed Harding, who got an exclusive interview with the guy where Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was found hiding in his boat. He got the exclusive interview. They didn't pay for it. He wanted to tell the truth to a journalist he respected. That can still happen.
Yeah, I think question marks arise when you see the price tags on these things. I mean, you don't necessarily pay $100,000 just for a picture or something, or even for footage or something. So, Paul, NBC has an independent company called Peacock Productions that's also sort of involved in putting together a program on kidnapped victim Hannah Anderson, and they're also going to help cover this space flight that Richard Branson is funding. Is that part of the problem? Is this some way to sort of skirt these rules that we're talking about?
Yes, that was the first episode of NBC News essentially paying for its news. They arranged a deal with Hannah Anderson and her father to create a documentary through this subsidiary, Peacock Productions. The numbers go up and up and up. It's over $100,000. It might even be $200,000. They haven't disclosed the actual figure. But, you know, the dodge is always we are paying to license family photos and footage. However, the cooperation of the source is always part of the deal, and that's what's going on in this case.
So, Callie, we've seen other instances where news outlets have paid for materials. The Toronto Sun reportedly paid $5,000 for a video of Toronto Mayor Rob Ford kind of going crazy and threatening someone's life. And Gawker had a story where they said that someone who had video of him smoking crack wanted 6 figures. So is this just the price of business in modern media?
It doesn't have to be, as I've said, but if it's going to be, then we, the viewers, should know that it's paid for. There ought to be, just like we see the logos of the networks or the media outlet all over the place on any, quote, exclusive footage, there ought to be something that says, we paid for this. This is something that we purchased. So then I, as a viewer, can determine whether or not, what you presented to me was influenced by that payment. I should know, it should be on the table that this was paid for. And as long as it's not on the table and we don't know it, it calls into question what really went on here and what do we know is truth.